Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Roberto Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the GFCC. We are here for the 7th GFCC Now Bridge Reboot conversation. We have a wonderful group of speakers coming from several countries. I'll introduce you to that in a minute. Before we get started, what I want to do here is first to share with our audience and for those who are joining us for the first time, what is this conversation series? Second, to comment a bit about the conversation that we're having today. And finally, to explain the logistics of the session. So we call this conversation series Now Bridge and Reboot. And we do that because we're all seeing the challenges and the things that are done on the ground today now to respond to the COVID crisis. And that has accelerated different trends, including digitalization. And here comes our the second topic. What is this session about? We have been talking about COVID and seeing developments around the globe. I think that two ideas are recurring in this conversation series. First, that COVID is a highlighter, especially a highlighter of maybe some of the weaknesses that we have in society. And the second one is that it's an accelerator. So it has been accelerating trends that were already here. One of those trends is digitalization, the use of digital technologies across sectors, domains of life, and industries. And we're talking here exactly about that today, exploring the topic through different lenses. So we can think about digitalization and digital tools to trace people who were infected, but we also think about tools like this one that we're using today, Zoom, to have this session. If we imagine that in December 2019, we had 10 million users a day, and that went to 200 million users a day in March and 300 million users in April. It's an incredible growth of the use of this type of platform. We can also think about digitalization in terms of how business models are changing. It's not just about technologies, but how we change the way we do things. We can think about entrepreneurship, how we are enabling and empower entrepreneurs to create the solutions that are needed now and in the future. We can also think about, and this is something that we also talk in different moments, and Deborah has highlighted that in various of our sessions about infrastructures. How can we make digital infrastructures and capabilities accessible to more people? And finally, how that is changing society, life, empowering citizens, promoting better conditions of living across a variety of domains. This is what we're talking here today, the use of digital technologies covering those different aspects. So let me introduce you our distinguished group of speakers today, starting with my boss, Deborah Winston-Smith. For those of you who have been joining us or joined previous sessions, you watched and you heard from Deborah. She has an incredible career that spanning private sector and government. She was the first Assistant Secretary for Technology Policy in the Commerce Department in the United States, and overseeing really the implementation of most of the tech transfer infrastructures that we have today. And she's the president and CEO of the Council on Competitiveness, and I'm happy and fortunate to have her as the president of the GFCC. Joining us from Melbourne, Australia, we have Professor Alexander Subich, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Science, Engineering, and Health, and Vice President for Digital Innovation at RMIT University. Professor Subich has a career that has really been focusing on how technologies are being used across a variety of the industries, and leading that previously to RMIT. He was at Swinburne University. But I was fortunate to talk with Alex a few months ago, about Industry 4.0. So he was appointed by the Prime Minister of Australia to be one of the leaders in the Industry 4.0 task force, and also the Australian Advanced Manufacturing Council group at the Australian Industry Group. So we're very excited to hear about how technologies are converging, reshaping manufacturing, but also other sectors in society. From India, we have Dr. Ashwani Kumar. Dr. Kumar is a former Minister of Law in India. He was a member of the parliament representing the state of Punjab, and he was the state minister for industrial policy in India, addressing topics as industrial transformation and also science and technology. We're very happy to have you here, Dr. Kumar, and to hear your perspective about how this set of technologies and things that come together are reshaping life. From Almaty, beautiful Almaty, Kazakhstan, we have Eldar Abdurazakov. Eldar is the founder and CEO of Centris Capital and the Centris Group in Kazakhstan. He has been working in finance over the years in Kazakhstan. He and Centris today is the one of the main companies in the Kazakhstan stock exchange. Eldar sits on a variety of boards. He's the chairman of the National Council on Competitiveness in Kazakhstan and a member of a variety of the networks around the globe. And if I can say, Eldar, you are the connector of the connectors, leveraging different networks and making things happen. From Washington, D.C., actually from Virginia, we have Mike Nelson. Mike's director of the Carnegie Endowment for Technology International at the Carnegie Endowment for Technology International Affairs program. He he had a variety of positions in business at Microsoft, where he was really one of the leaders working on technology policy, but also IBM, Cloudflare, and other companies. And in 1993, he joined Vice President Al Gore, working and designing part of the initial legislation that led to the creation of the commercial internet. Thanks for doing that. I've heard the internet's important, Mike. So great to have you here. From Zanzibar today, but normally based in Kenya, we have Regina Njima. Regina, it's entrepreneur, investor, host, convener. He was one of the leaders driving the global expansion of Singularity University, lived for several years in California, moved back to Africa. It's working on the ground with entrepreneurs and driving the new economy in Africa. Great to have you here, Regina. And finally, from Oman, we have Saif Al-Hidabi. Great to have you here again, Saif. Saif is one of the leaders in the science and technology space. He was a visiting professor at the MIT, originally working with aerospace engineering and deeply into engineering, simulation and technology, but driving this national perspective and really trying to see how different technologies can be leveraged to build new industries. Great to have you here, Saif. So third point here on the logistics, we will start with initial remarks, and Deborah will make some initial remarks. Then we'll go and give the word to each one of our speakers for their initial considerations. Then we'll have a conversation. I'll ask everybody to be respectful of the time. So let's say 4 minutes for each one of you to make your initial remarks. And after Deborah, we are starting geographically, coming from Australia to India to Kazakhstan and coming to the West. And this is our battle plan for the conversation. And finally, if you're joining us, please really join the conversation. Use the Q&A feature here to share your questions. I will be curating, pulling your questions, directing to our speakers. They are also able to see your questions, so expect some on, let's say, real-time interactions here. Having said that, Deborah, I would like to turn to you and we can get started.
Thank you, Roberto, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone on our GFCC 7th call and conversation. It's just delightful for me to be able to see on the Zoom screen our friends and colleagues. Regina, nice to meet you as well. But very, very happy to see everyone that we have been working so closely with to build a global competitiveness community. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to be very brief and just make a few points. Digitalization and its impact on how we live and work and everything has been talked about for a long time, and it has certainly been accelerating. But as Roberto said, the COVID-19 global pandemic really was the ultimate stress test on the infrastructure as well as the applications and systems that enabled many, many countries around the world to rapidly move to online work, rapid movement to online education, and the use of telemedicine and telesystems to deliver healthcare, as well as the use now of tremendous teleservices for delivery, for ordering. I mean, the whole implosion of e-commerce that has been predicted just accelerated at warp speed. And of course, also we've seen the social implications of the digitization and the visualization tools that, yes, enable us to communicate the way we are today, but very importantly for people who have been in the hospital ill with COVID to be able to communicate with their families through social media and everything. That has been a human side of digitization. Certainly, I'll make a few comments in the United States. Our systems have been very resilient. They've taken on a huge toll in terms of traffic and delivering, but we've also seen the urban-rural divide. And I think one of the things that on the policy front will be a very strong call in the United States to really have universal broadband. This has been particularly true and needy for school children, who many of whom have not had access to the internet and computers to do their work online. So that's an area that we all need to focus on, coupled to electrification, to enable universal broadband and access to use these digital tools. The other area that we have seen really be impacted tremendously by this acceleration of the digital world in dealing and responding to COVID in every dimension is the tremendous increase in cyber attacks and malicious cyber activity. And again, as one of our colleagues, who Kumar and others know, Koji Omi from Japan, it's the light and shadows. And we've seen a lot of the shadows on the cybersecurity front with an acceleration of malicious attacks. And I know in the United States, and perhaps Alexandra will mention this, we've seen a tremendous increase in cyber attacks at research universities, particularly those working on the virus and potential vaccines. But on the positive side, I think we will never go back to how we were before. I think work is fundamentally changed now. Many companies, large, medium, and small, have said they will not just continue to work remotely, but they will really finally give their employees the opportunity to make a choice about how they're going to work. And this will have huge repercussions. We've heard that, big offices are obsolete, but still with social distancing now, we've heard that big offices, are in demand. So that's sort of a conundrum. But then also on the digital front and the really importance of the universality of having access to these technologies really are the equity issues, the inclusion issues, the social justice issues that also have been laid bare through the global pandemic. So we have a tremendous opportunity in all of our respective countries to ensure we have the infrastructure, but also that these tools and capabilities can unleash the next wave of entrepreneurship and inclusive prosperity. So I look forward to our discussion, and I know that each of our panelists will add very important dimensions to this very critical topic, not just for the COVID pandemic, but going into the future in every dimension of life. So look forward to hearing our guests and to have a great discussion on chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Alex, thanks. It's late nights there, so thanks for taking the time, joining us, sharing your perspective and thoughts. As I said, you are a leader coming from research, but really you're doing an amazing work with the industry. We had a short conversation a few weeks ago, and you are driving the use of digital technologies in the industry in partnership with Siemens and other companies. So how are you seeing this whole digital drive going forward now, not just in manufacturing, but overall? And for sure, you as a university leader, universities are being seriously affected and are really adopting a lot of digital technologies to run their operations. So over to you, Alex. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Deborah. It's truly a pleasure to join you and to join our colleagues on the panel. Hi, everyone. May I continue from Deborah's opening remarks, which actually set wonderfully the scene for this conversation, and by saying that, COVID-19, if it has done anything, it has accelerated the transformation, the digital transformation, and the deployment of the, if I can call it, the fourth industrial revolution. It's almost supercharged the fourth industrial revolution over the last year or so. We are seeing, and we have seen before COVID, an amazing convergence of new technologies into new evolving cyber physical systems. And it has played out in the manufacturing sector big time. And we're seeing it evolving into the health sector, the finance sector, in fact, across all sectors of our industry and societies. We're seeing technologies such as Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, cyber technologies, cybersecurity technologies, automation, robotics, and so on, sensors and so on, almost coming together in a perfect storm, where we are looking at cyber physical systems that are bringing autonomy, bringing intelligence at a level that we have never seen before. The third industrial revolution has seen computation and automation. This is moving to a completely new level of intelligence, of connected or hyper-connected systems. This is something that represents a new challenge, not just for industry, but for society in general. If I reflect on the advanced manufacturing sector in Australia, like in many countries, 95% or majority of the sector are SMEs. SMEs that on their own, they're not able to navigate quickly and at scale to the fourth industrial revolution. We had to explore ways of organizing, connecting the SME sectors in advanced manufacturing domains in order to help them transform their capabilities, transform their workforce, and in a way, help them access global value chains in order to progress with their agenda. This requires not only technological change, it requires radical innovation in business models, it requires workforce transformation at pace and scale. We often talk about the workforce of the future. I like to say that the future starts now, and our obligation to upskilling, reskilling current workforce is extremely important. What we have done in order to maintain this 4-minute introduction, just briefly, we have focused via the Prime Minister's Task Force in Australia, as well as the Australian Industry Group Forum, to establish hubs across the nation in each of the states around Industry 4.0 test labs, a model very similar to the one that Germany has applied, where we are using clustering of SMEs around areas of priority or industry growth areas, and where we are exposing SMEs to new Industry 4.0 technologies in a non-competitive, supported environment, where we're engaging students, staff, researchers, practitioners, industry partners, in almost like a sandpit to explore together new technologies, to work on business models, and to bring the digital readiness to a higher level. By building networks and building hubs is our approach to creating scale. And that has then now transferred into pilot programs and scale-up programs in education. Just final note, as you know, historically, if we look at all the industrial revolutions, the education and training sector has somewhat lagged in technology adoption compared to the commercial sector. What we are doing on this occasion, hopefully learning from previous industrial revolutions, we're trying to do this in parallel by bringing industry in and actually working with industry, the global partners and the supply chains to embrace technologies and cyber physical systems in educational programs now in real time on commercial platforms, working with our partners to actually expose our students to experiences that they will experience in industry as they go out. And in that way, fast track the development both within the education sector as well as across the supply chains in the sectors of our choice. I might end there, Roberto. I'm trying to keep to my timelines, and I'll contribute as we progress to a Q&A session.
Kudos to you. Thanks for being limited to the time, Alex. And you mentioned one word that really stick it to my mind: scale. We'll be back to that. How to prepare people on scale, how to really address this at a society and economy level scale from SMEs and really supported, let's say, the bottom of the economy to adopt those things. Thanks for highlighting that. We'll be back to that topic. Dr. Kumar, we talked a bit about technology here, business, but how are those things impacting life? Your country, India, has a digital national initiative that's a flagship initiative if we see from outside of India. So what are your thoughts on the potential of digital technologies to improve quality of life, citizenship, impact humanity, and maybe if you could share a bit about what's going on the ground there. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Thank you for having me on this program. And Deborah, thank you very much for asking me, and a very big hello to all my co-panelists on this program. Before I talk about the Digital India Initiative briefly, I would like very much to preface those remarks by saying that quite clearly, as Deborah pointed out, post-COVID-19 world will in many ways herald a transition from an emerging digital society to the digital age. Now, when I say we are going to be in a digital age, it means that there will be no aspect of our life which will remain unimpacted by the influence of digital technologies, by the use of digital technologies, AI, 5G telephony, and so forth and so on, robotics. My concern is on a more fundamental level when it comes to the overall impact on the quality of society and the quality of human life. We all know that technology has been a great enabler, a great empowerer of common citizens. It has been a great resource against the challenges that the world faces in common, be it pandemics, be it cybersecurity, be it terrorism, be it nutrition, and so forth and so on. Therefore, the preeminent role of technology, including the digital technologies, in carrying forward that process of global empowerment is a given, and nobody doubts that even for a moment. But the perennial debate that still surrounds the subject and will continue to defy us in the years ahead is how to have a harmonious construct between a technology-driven society and the humanitarian perception about the world which we choose for ourselves in the future. For example, in the post-COVID aftermath, when we are told that we will be necessarily have to be very conscious about the human touch, the distancing, the smell, and so forth and so on, I often ask myself, what kind of a world do we envisage for our children and the succeeding generations? We need to have a more humane world. We need to have a more happier world. That is going to be the test of technology. It is going to be the test of our ingenuity in ensuring that the power of technology is tamed to the human impulses of doing good. And that ultimately is the test of whether human civilization has progressed or not. Merely creating tools of empowerment is not enough. Empowerment for what? So therefore, issues of privacy, issues of human dignity, issues concerning the way we treat our sick people. And very recently in India, we have seen the question of treatment of dead bodies giving rise to great issues and very sensitive issues about human dignity of the dead. So when we talk of the digitalization program, and when we talk about its ability to deliver governance and services on demand, as is the aim of Digital India program in my country, I ask myself whether in the process of zealously promoting certain technologies for functional efficiencies on a daily basis, we have not forgotten the larger humanitarian perceptions that must always remain at the back of our minds. Now, as far as the Digital India program is concerned, I can tell you that it is off to a good start. we have achieved remarkable success in extending the reach of education to the marginalized and the people in the villages. We have had tremendous qualitative and improvements also in terms of affordability as far as healthcare systems are concerned. In fact, even in the transport area, where we have one of the largest number of cars and automobiles in the world, we have had extraordinary functional efficiencies. In the governance and services areas, also we've had huge successes. But I still come back to my concern about the centrality of emotions. The centrality of emotions, even in our day-to-day functionalities, will disappear. That is how I see the world coming to, what the world is coming to, and I'm not very happy about it. I think, therefore, we must involve in this debate, which is going to be a global debate for several years to come, philosophers, political scientists, who will touch the larger issues rather than just the mechanics of delivery of services and security and empowerment through technology. And the last word, before my 4 minutes conclude, you know, as somebody said, digitalization, robotics, AI, IT platforms, and the way we live will not only impact our economy, will not only impact our society, it will impact our culture, it will impact our religion. As somebody said, religion will now be more God-centered and priest-free. And I think this is a correct assessment. On the question of culture, the kind of values that we are beaming through digital technologies in every home in the world, whether we want that or not, the exploitation of children, issues relating to copyrights, issues relating to possession and ownership of knowledge. All these are extremely complex issues and highly sensitive issues, as indeed they are important in our perception of where we are going ahead with our technology-driven world. So technological supremacy, in terms of functional efficiency, yes, but not in the ordering of our personal lives, not in the ordering of those values that have actually defined humanity forever and ever. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kumar, and for, I would say, bringing this hierarchical perspective that we have tech, but we need values and human systems to be addressed first in some way to frame that. And I think there's a connection here, Eldar, to business, that technology is enough in terms of transforming business. It's not given the solution. A lot about digital transformation, it's really analog transformation, how we transform processes, systems, management systems, and thinking. So maybe a good cue for you, Eldar, to jump into the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, Roberto. Glad to be here. And maybe I'll just spotlight from the business point of view. And clearly for us, the case with the coronavirus, it's a big bang, because in our country, digitalization was on the agenda for a few years. And in 2017, the government produced a program for digital Kazakhstan, trying to push the agenda. But that is, I would like just maybe to highlight, to push the agenda, because the now looking and reflecting what has happened with the lockdown, we had just very successful first lockdown, but it looks like we're facing the second lockdown with the second wave of coronavirus here in the country. I think now it's a time when we see that the push coming from the government, coming from the top, it doesn't mean that it will be successful. And that is the difference between the push and pull, when the economy and the sector is not prepared and you don't have the mechanism in the economy which will pull the need for the digitalization. And that is very important, because the lesson what we learn in Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan is clearly it's very commodity-based economy, and we have this issue of the digitalization, what in the digital world is called legacy systems. We have the situation when the bigger players, incumbents, they design their view and vision based on the existing historical grounds. And from that point of view, what we have seen this push system, how to prioritize the digitalization of the industries, how to prioritize the system of the logistics of old systems, that is usually came to the point when usually we say the generals usually play the last war. And that is the exact situation when we have the industries which has been digitalized. But clearly the debates, what we have in Kazakhstan, where is actually who is the main enabler of the digitalization? Is it technologies or is it the consumer with the smartphone? We clearly now come to the point that it's the enabler and the empowerment comes from the smartphone and the consumers. The importance of the customer experience. There is a need for the new, new functions, new features, creates the pool for the new capabilities. And that's why the focus, maybe I'll highlight on the scope rather than scale. When we have the now checking, what is digitalization? What is the program of the past 5 years? Is it was successful? Was it clearly brought the benefits to the economy? Has it improved the competitiveness of the economy? And clearly today, that is a reflection point when we clearly understand there are the capabilities which are critical for developing the economy, creating, the new opportunities in the quite a welfare state industries and sectors like healthcare and education. It's clearly today we see that the digitalization which we're pushing ahead, clearly it's certainly have the weaknesses, has its own bottlenecks, and it's clearly today it's quite evident that is the learning what we needed from this digitalization, not based on the existing, maybe even completely new knowledges, but primarily to manage these knowledges as a process. It's clearly it's lagging behind. From that point of view, I would say today we're just from the digitalization point of view, that is the debates where to push it, how is actually or create the pool system that is critical to us here in Kazakhstan. And that is something we're now paying more attention. We're looking that there are certain bottlenecks are coming, and certainly with tension coming on the geopolitical side and the movement on the limitation of certain technologies. And certainly it's restricting the world. And from that point of view, it's today we're looking more on the creating these capabilities, creating these opportunities for the country, for the more mass developments or more continuous improvement on every stage and every side, making that available to local businesses. That is clearly our agenda today.
So let's say hacking the social system to find the key levers. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I think this is a great connection to what you are doing in OMA side, thinking countrywide, not just in terms of implementing, deploying new things, but you are also thinking about how to build the industries of the future. So what are the levers? How can we hack the social system, society to better use and leverage future developments? Over to you, Saif.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Thank you, Honorable Deborah. And thank you, GFCC, actually, for inviting me to this excellent series of dialogue, which is really has an intelligent slogan, now, bridge, and reboot. Of course, to learn from each other on the challenges of COVID-19 and to turn these challenges into a possible opportunities. We are here in Oman now in the summer, the middle of the summer. So very warm greetings to all distinguished speakers and to the listeners of this conversation from here. As you know, Oman is a country located in the southeastern part of the Arabian Peninsula with about 5 million inhabitants. And like many nations, we got also affected by the coronavirus. And as of yesterday, the number of infected people is close to 40,000 people. And sadly, we lost about 179 lives since the beginning of the pandemic. And also, like many countries, the country responded early by establishing a supreme committee to handle actually this crisis of coronavirus, and fortunately effectively took several measures to flatten the curve. In addition to that, actually this committee established subcommittees. Maybe one of them is relevant to the conversation that we are really talking about. That subcommittee is related to the Technological Innovation Committee to adapt digital technologies and solutions for such a pandemic. And successfully, actually, we managed here in Oman to launch several solutions, I mean, really to adapt to the situation, such as the online medical consultations, distance learning platforms, also e-commerce platforms. I mean, Oman is really have a very long coastline, so we do a lot of fishing, and nobody goes to the fish market. So platforms actually for auctions has taken place basically for fish markets. Again, along with lots of mobile applications, basically to update the public about the spread of the coronavirus, as well as utilizing the fourth industrial revolution, drones to serialize places and basically to detect issues related to COVID-19. In fact, connectivity and digital transformation is a main pillar in Oman as part of the National Innovation Strategy, which include initiatives such as expansion of the broadband network and comprehensive digital services with the aim of covering all regions in the Sultanate with communication, internet services, especially in remote area. And actually that investment, that infrastructure is paying off now, actually, when the coronavirus started really to touch life in Oman. We in the Research Council is contributing to that actually by several programs, which became very important during this pandemic issue. We had a program we called Oman Research and Education Network. Basically, it's a high-speed network connecting universities. And soon this program became really an important program to link universities, so students really can really have courses online. And we have also Oman Virtual Science Library. So actually students can get access to this digital information online. And there are also several SMEs came out during this pandemic, basically part of the public authority privatization partnership. I mean, the Science Park here in the Research Council, through what we call it Makers Oman, they managed actually to develop masks and ventilators that actually can cope with the demand during this pandemic time. We have also several programs such as the Smart City programs, I mean, where people are really trying to utilize technology and digitization in order really to avoid, for example, crowd and the spread of diseases, so that actually it might help at least in flatten the curve of COVID-19. So these are some of the initiatives that really took place over the past few months, trying to cover up. And we can see that, I mean, digitization and digital solution really is a key area in really helping the nation dealing with this crisis. Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you so much, Saif. I think I'll leave one question here in the clipboard for you to address later. That's really about the coverage of the infrastructure. How do you provide access in scattered areas, and what you are doing to address that? But we can leave that for, let's say, our next round. So thanks for sharing. Regina, a lot of things are being said about Africa. On the one hand, about the opportunity maybe to leapfrog some of the legacy systems and infrastructures that other parts of the globe have using digital technologies. At the same time, you have a wonderful pool of people, a young population, really keen on using digital technologies, and lots of things are happening in terms of digital entrepreneurship. So Could you share that with us? What are the opportunities that you're seeing? What's happening? What are the hot things going on?
Yes, I'm happy to share, and like my fellow speaker, I'm super excited to be part of this panel and to share my thoughts. I think the scenario in Kenya is similar to what Elder had shared about Kazakhstan. So what happened the last couple of years, Kenya government has been pushing an agenda to digitize the government, the private sectors, the entrepreneurial spaces, and there's been a huge push around that. But I think, as you all might know, once when you have a push that's top down, there's certain issues that were not thought of in the beginning around cybersecurity. So I think sometime last year, we passed a Cybersecurity Act that's been amended at the moment because it didn't cover all the issues that individuals felt they were exposed to, some of those threats they were exposed to. But to your question about can Africa leapfrog, I think definitely. And I think we've seen this in a number of cases, and fintech is one of the areas that I think the African countries have been able to leapfrog very well. Most of you know of M-Pesa. It's been there for the last 10 years. It's mobile payment. It was really innovative at the very beginning. And at the moment, almost 50% of the Kenyan GDP goes through the mobile money, which is amazing. I hardly use money when I'm in Kenya. I literally just leave the home with my phone. That's all I need. And I'll be able to pay my groceries, my gas, if it's just tuition, hospital bills, everything. I'm able to pay everything via my phone. And I'm still able to transact online like I used to do in the US. But what I have in Kenya is very different because I can do everything via my phone. And that has also been super helpful now with the COVID-19 crisis. One of the company that has the mobile payment platform called Safaricom, they've allowed any money transfer of less than $10, people are able to transact for free, which is amazing. The leadership of Kenya have encouraged people to not to use money, to use mobile money for all the transaction. That has also helped in making sure that spread is controlled and people are actually following public health measures. There are also other industries that a lot of innovation. There is a lot of startups that are already working on having virtual teachers, having virtual tutors who will be able to teach kids when they're at which is amazing. The other thing around leapfrogging is about mobile penetration. In Kenya, like an example, there's about 90% of mobile penetration in Kenya alone, and for the continent, the number of mobile penetration will go up to 7 times between now and 2025. That's really impressive. So the wireless and those are the phone systems. Around agriculture, we're seeing a lot of innovation. We really know with COVID-19, in Kenya, we had massive flood. Was locust infestation within the entire East Africa. So there was food crisis that's happening on the ground. So we've seen startups and of course government and also international community that's been able to chime in to ensure there is food security around COVID-19. And of course, some of those innovations will stay on and they'll be able to help in providing food later on. The one thing that maybe I think some of you might have touched on around digitization and COVID-19 that we've seen, especially around East Africa and I think most of Sub-Saharan Africa, is the divide around one digitization and some of that, what COVID-19 has, how COVID-19 has impacted working and people have been forced not to work from home. One of the things that we've seen is there's a lot of inequality between the haves and the have-nots. I was very excited to be able to now work from home, have virtual calls, have a challenge initially, but now you're seeing most companies, most institutions, they're encouraging people to work from home. But again, there is a huge group of people who don't have the privilege to work from home. So for instance, if you're living in a slum, like Kibera, for instance, it's one of the biggest slums in the entire continent. Those people don't have the privilege to, one, afford internet. Internet is quite expensive. They need to have electricity to connect. They need to be able to have a space where they can actually work from home without interference from kids and other family issues. And that has been a huge challenge. It's been a huge challenge, and I've met with people who really want to go to their office. They can't work from home, and these are some of the inequality issues that we are now seeing caused with COVID-19. We have some platforms that provide virtual healthcare, but again, for you to access some of those platforms, you need internet connectivity. So we are also seeing a number of people who cannot access that because the physical interaction has been stopped or it's been reduced, so they can't have access to some of the same facilities, including healthcare, as they used to have before. On the positive side around what entrepreneurs are doing, we've seen a lot of hubs and universities that have producing ventilators and distributing this to hospitals. Entrepreneurs are just jumping, looking at opportunities, looking at what people need during COVID-19. Like for instance, if it's masks and providing those, we've seen way more startups that are working in delivering food. We've seen really interesting partnership between companies similar called Jumia. It's similar to say Amazon in the US. We've partnered with another company called Trigger Food, where they're providing fresh food and distributing this to homes. So we've seen a lot of interesting things that COVID-19. And maybe my last thought is I'll leave with an analogy that a friend of mine shared with me, which I thought was really interesting. I think, as we all know, COVID-19 spreads at an exponential rate, and except in instances where we've been able to implement public health measures, and or if we have a vaccine, with technology, it's still spreading at an exponential rate, and nothing can stop the spread. We've seen, looking at and other crises, technology has still been changing at a very fast rate. So I think for me, looking at COVID-19, it's almost like a blessing in disguise, because now our leaders are forced to think in a very different way. Some of the same messaging that you were telling about, transforming, embracing digital tools, being able to make sure that the students and the students in universities are educated and have digital skills. Now we're seeing those messages are actually landing, and leaders are actually embracing those messages. So it's kind of it's a blessing in disguise, but we are also very, I'm very optimistic that we're going to stop the COVID-19 crisis, and we'll be able to take some of the benefits that we'll have learned from that.
Thank you, Regina, and thanks for this. I think it's an important point that you made about introducing a new way of thinking, even in a bad way, but forcing people to see, understand the new dynamics. But you also mentioned this critical gap related to access and infrastructure. And I think that's a great cue for you, Mike, as you've been thinking and working really to create the frameworks that would make digital connectivity more accessible to people across, let's say, different realities. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and thank you to you and to Deborah for the opportunity to be here. I spent about 3 years as a professor at Georgetown, and so I tend to speak in 50-minute segments, but I'm going to keep this very short, and I can do that because my fellow speakers covered many of the topics I wanted to cover. I'm a technologist. I'm also a futurist, and like Regina, I'm an optimist. I've been working for more than 30 years to enable the internet, and this year is the most critical year that we've had yet in the development of digital technologies. COVID and the medical crisis is important, but the economic crisis is what's really going to drive change, and I think force the politicians to take on some really tough issues that they haven't taken on yet. I'm a technological optimist, but I'm usually a political pessimist. In a crisis, however, politics can move fast. And we've seen that already. Deborah mentioned that we've eliminated the laws that got in the way of telemedicine. We're moving fast to move government services online. The fact is, in March and April, in most countries in Europe and the US, we saw 5 years of digitization in 5 weeks. We had the tools, we had Zoom, we had the cloud, we had all these ways to work from home, and suddenly we all used them because the managers who wanted people in the office knew that wasn't possible. And likewise, I think as politicians and political policymakers look around and realize they have to find ways to generate tens of millions of new jobs to replace the jobs that have been lost, they're going to take on some of the tough issues. Deborah mentioned the need to connect the unconnected. And it's not just getting a connection. In some cases, it's upgrading from very slow, flaky connections to a real solid broadband connection that can support this kind of Zoom call. Another critical issue is trust. And Dr. Kumar mentioned that and how we need to provide for better authentication, better privacy, better security. India has been a leader in that. Other countries can learn from the Agnar project. But perhaps the most important thing we have to get right is encryption. And this is a debate right now. Tomorrow, in the US Senate, the Judiciary Committee is considering a bill that would really make it hard for companies to use end-to-end encryption, which is vital not only for services like Zoom and your email, but for all of the things that Alex mentioned about Industry 4.0. We have got to have strong encryption end-to-end and in the cloud. And yet there are people who want to monitor everything that happens on the internet, which isn't possible if the traffic is encrypted. So there's this fundamental tension that has to be resolved. It's just one of about 7 thorny issues that our team is working on at Carnegie, not only for the US, but the globe. And we have to get this right. We have to get through this. If we do, we can continue to see this rapid adoption of new services, not only for work, but also for family, for neighborhoods. The numbers are extraordinary. It's not a 10% increase or a 50% increase. These services have gone up 700%. There's a service called Nextdoor for connecting neighborhoods. That's gone up 75%. There's all these opportunities to bring people together, to collaborate better, to develop more efficient government, more efficient manufacturing, better healthcare, but it all depends on getting the policies right. And I hope that this crisis will push us in the right directions and get away from where we are today, where inertia gets in the way of progress. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for highlighting that when we think about infrastructures, we should not be concerned only about hard infrastructures, but the soft infrastructures that are behind or are really like the OS of our society. And we'll be back to that.
We really should celebrate what's happened because the internet has seen an increase of 30, 40, 50%, and it's worked. No other utility, water, electricity could have done that. So we should be celebrating how well the digital industries have responded so far.
Yep. Please ask questions. Use the Q&A feature here. We already have some coming. So please share that with us. Our panelists will be addressing that. Deborah, I would like to turn to you for your reflections on this round and the exciting ideas that we heard from our colleagues.
Thank you, Roberto. And let me thank everyone for their outstanding contribution. You know, in addition to learning what's going on in your respective countries, I think one of the overarching themes is how we connect and integrate the tools and possibility and the power of the digital world with our humanity. And I was very happy to hear that raised by everyone, really. And also, you know, the issues around how we value our cultures, our philosophy, you know, the humanities, the arts. I mean, I'm looking at Regina's beautiful artwork right now and wanting to get a better view of that. And it captures her personality, but these things that make us human, we have to not just celebrate, but ensure, and Mike, I'm looking at yours as well, that we have these really embedded in our future. The other thing I found really interesting to start, perhaps as we go forward in the conversation, and I alluded a little bit about the need for electrification, but also, you know, precision agriculture, digital water systems, the whole decarbonization of the world through digital technologies. These things have to come together now too, as a part of this rebuilding of the world with the infrastructure we need to develop prosperity. And, you know, the water issues are huge. Obviously, there are tremendous concerns in energy as well, not just about the carbon, but about the vulnerability of grids and power systems to both cyber attacks and terrorism, but just the reliance and reliability and resiliency of these systems. So I think everybody's talking about the rebuilding part now, which is great because that's really where we need to go. And finally, you know, on the issue of trust, we've talked about trust a lot during these conversations, and there is a deficit of trust, and there's a deficit of digital trust. You know, the cleansing of data, the integrity of data, you know, all the sources of data, and couple that to the privacy. I mean, these are huge human issues. So I'm really pleased that everybody touched on these one way or the other. And I think we will have a great discussion now. So thank you all.
Deborah, if I can add one thing on the matter of trust, it's also about reliability. And in too many countries, the internet gets turned off on occasion. Ethiopia is offline today, the entire country, because of protests triggered by the murder of one of the most beloved singers in the country. And this happens thousands of times around the world, sometimes the city, sometimes the province. If we can't keep the internet working, if politicians turn it off because they don't like what somebody put in the newspaper, we've got a problem, and we've got to change that.
Thank you. One question that we got here, I think it really relates to the things that several of you talked about, starting with Alex. And it's really about preparing, it's about accessibility, but making technologies accessible to small companies, preparing the skill, providing the skills that are needed. So it has one component that I see more like the infrastructural component, right? But also the human component or a human capability component of that. So maybe Alex, I could turn to you because you mentioned SMEs, and the question that we have here is really about SMEs. So how can we include more companies and people? How can we develop and nurture the skills that are needed? How can we create the infrastructures that are needed? And saying that, I think maybe we could turn this round more to the how part of this. So Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Roberto. Quite a good question. May I also say that, like Mike, I'm a real techno optimist, and I'm unchangeable. I've been techno optimist throughout the years and even now. I'll give an example why I am a techno optimist before I move to answering your question, Roberto. You know, during the COVID-19 outbreak in Australia, when it really, the first wave kicked in and we hit the peak, within only a couple of weeks, a few million students across the whole university sector and secondary sector have moved online. A few years ago, if we said that as of next week, all of you will have your education offline, we would say it's impossible. You know, everybody, including academics, teachers, everybody would say this is not possible. It was made possible because of technology, because of internet, but also, as Deborah mentioned, because of the national broadband network. This was a largely controversial project in Australia because of cost, because of delays, and it was rolled out just in time before the disruption. You know, I hate to imagine what it would look like if we haven't had it. So that actually, Deborah, you made a really good point. It almost becomes a strategic national infrastructure when we see the role it has to play, similar to internet being a strategic global infrastructure, because without it, we would not have been able to roll this out. So on that note, I might move to the SME issue, Roberto. That was a particular focus in Australia, both within the Prime Minister's Industry 4.0 task force, as well as within the Australian Industry Group executive and work streams. We realized that across many sectors, and I mentioned manufacturing sector, the large portion, in fact, 95% of the manufacturing sector are SMEs. We've looked at that issue very closely because if we want to transform the industry, we had to achieve a number of things. We had to engage with the SMEs. It's not about technological change only, it's about business model change, it's about workforce transformation, but it was about clustering like-minded sectors or similar industries in clusters where we can expose them to Industry 4.0 technologies, to the practices, to innovative business models that are benefiting or embracing the new technologies, and the skills that are needed, where we can actually assess their digital readiness and then, knowing the gaps, provide some guidance and advice and direction how to bridge those gaps. We've clustered, we've established those hubs around the country where those industry clusters are congregating around common areas of interest, common needs, common problems, common issues. Now, to accelerate that further, what we've also done is we've started bringing into the fold as a consortia global digital companies that have a global reach because of two reasons. First, knowing that the digital transformation of SMEs will rely heavily also, the success of that will rely heavily on them being able to access the global value chains, because only local focus has become a limiting factor in that transformation and growth. Second, the global digital companies have worked with us to bring their supply chains and global supply chains and local supply chains of companies and working together to bring them to the same technology standards in cybersecurity, we've talked about cybersecurity, in digital software and so on, so that they are all compatible and have a better chance to work globally, because standards are among the critical enablers of having the ability to work globally, including working on similar technology platforms. I might leave it at that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Alex. Maybe Eldar, if I could turn to you, how are you seeing this in society, addressing like the average company or SMEs and developing their capabilities and doing what Alex was just saying?
When we're talking about SMEs and the businesses, I would like clearly to differentiate, because clearly 78% of the companies around the world, that is the small organization with the number of the staff below 10. It's 98% below 100. And when we're talking about the digitalization with the cloud is coming with a huge democratization of the services, but it's a long way to go. And from that point of view, when we're talking about SME, the primary problem they face that's come with the basic competence within the companies. And we consider that is the area we need to educate people more. The drivers of the process, we see that is more mid-sized companies who have some capacity inside, but clearly for them, it's building new capabilities, especially now with the capabilities in machine learning, capabilities in connecting and getting the data platform, creating the network effect and integrating the services. That is the area where actually we consider the primary focus should be primarily, that is the area of capabilities. The growth of capabilities, that is critical. The larger companies, which are incumbent companies, what we see that it's primarily issue for them, it's a culture, that is alignment of interest with the society, with the businesses, with the market. That is primarily how to align their interests where they clearly the products or they say capacity and capabilities they have will be made available and will enable the smaller businesses to utilize their capacities and capabilities. That is clearly from that point of view, we should differentiate, because size matter, and it's not the way we'll have the one approach to everyone. And from that point of view, SME should clearly, we need at this moment, we're in the stage, we need to educate, because they are not prepared institutionally to face the complexity and the complexness of the issues. And from that point of view, we need to, to bring the decisions which are available and easy to use.
Thank you. So you are breaking the economy down into 3 different layers, and you are really seeing that probably the lever for economy-wide dissemination, it's really about mid-sized companies, different types of problems, but maybe the main opportunity. Yep.
Exactly.
Because there are more fundamental problems to be addressed at the, let's say, the SME level. Got it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So maybe Regina and Saif, how do you see this issue about skills and enabling transformation at the economy level in your realities?
Well, I think this is really very important. It's an important stage where transformation really towards the digital arena need lots of training, needs lots of programs in order really to facilitate that transition smoothly, and to transform, the classical businesses, even classical education, into actually more into the digitization phase. So, for example, in Oman, we really have several initiatives along that direction. The nation has established Oman Technology Fund, which is basically a funding mechanism to help SMEs and initiatives, small businesses, to be trained first and then to be supported financially. They can get a grant up to $50,000 or even $100,000, basically to transform their ideas into the potential market. Many universities also have now what we call them technology transfer offices, basically to transform ideas that come out from either students or faculty, and try to promote them into what we call them actually small initiatives or startups. And we have several actually incubation space at the national level, trying to leverage and support this transformation, especially in the digital arena, because of the speed compared to a lot of physical development. Even we have actually specific programs at the Research Council. We call them upgrade programs. And these upgrade programs, mainly they take ICT final year projects. Final year students projects, normally graduation projects. They are actually in the area of information and communication technology. So we really have like a competition. The best out of those projects, we log them into actually a program. Those which have potential to become companies and establish businesses, and we incubate them over a period of 3 years with financial support, so that we can create this transformation and embed that, this kind of effort actually with training and with business mentoring, so that these graduates will be able to develop their own SMEs and create their own future, and even create jobs and create a socio-economic impact at the national level. So these are the kinds of things. Certainly, we have also a body for the national body. Basically, it's a fund specifically for training, and I think training is an important bridge, especially in the era of the 4th industrial revolution. Lots of jobs possibly might get lost. So what you're going to do with upskilling the existing force? So that upskilling, actually, the government is playing a role along that direction, along with the businesses, basically to support this transition from classical, basically doing things in a classical way to more into the digitized world.
Thank you. So are you funding companies, not just, you said that you are supporting startups, but I understood that you're also funding companies to adopt new technologies and change, to train their personnel and to, let's say, upgrade their business models. Is that the case?
Yes, I mean, Roberto, I think this is a shared responsibility between the businesses and the government, because that transition, that training, it's not only in the hand of the businesses. The government has also to put effort along that direction in order really to help upskilling the workforce and make them ready actually for the fourth industrial revolution.
Regina, we talked about like new things being created, but how do you connect those things with the existing economy? That's part of the conversation that we had here. How do you see, like, let's say, this skills gap being addressed in your reality?
I think it's similar to what's happening in Oman. There are many actors who are helping in upscaling, especially the youth. One of the unique things in Africa is when you look at the population of the youth, it's extremely high. 40% the continent is less than 15 years. So we have this huge population of young people. And I think that's an advantage because it's way easier for young people to adapt new ways of thinking, new ways of using technology and learning all the digital skills as compared, for instance, teaching my father who's right. So I think that's an advantage on our end. And we're seeing different actors from the government to private institution, one of the biggest banks in Kenya, the telecom company. We're seeing media companies who are entering that space to first upskill their own internal employee and also to recruit people outside and take them through a course before they're hired. I think they set up the Mastercard Foundation. Their headquarters is now moving to Rwanda. In East Africa, target is mostly around youth and unemployment. The other interesting thing on the continent is when you look at the unemployment level within the youth, it's quite high. An example in Kenya, unemployment amongst the youth is 40%. That's insane. And we cannot expect the governments or the private institution to be able to absorb all these young people. So there's been a lot of initiatives around entrepreneurship, people coming up with ideas and forming their own companies because most of these people actually cannot be hired. And since there are also a lot of social challenges, people have a lot of ideas on what they can solve that's impacting a lot of people and create a business around that. In energy across all industries that are coming up and actually solving big issues that are affecting people within the entire region, if not the entire continent. So I think that's an easier way to, one, create jobs and also for people to get their first employment in these startups that are already leveraging exponential technology and not space. Funding is coming from locally within the country. It's coming from outside the country. We are seeing, again, the same private companies that are running challenges and giving funds to startups. And I think it's a way for them to get innovative ideas within their business model. So we're seeing a lot of big corporate companies doing that. Same. It's also something that I also do with entrepreneurs, running challenges and connecting them to investors that I know within my network. So there's a lot that's being done. I think one interesting thing that I've seen, and I think it would be worth discussing, it's around the universal basic income. I think there's a lot of the conversation around low of job that will come through automation and having a lot of people who are going to lose their jobs. And there's been all this conversation between should you provide universal basic income or not? But I think in where we've seen now governments to individuals who've lost their job. I'm yet to see the research, but from the people I've talked to, I've seen people are still industrious. They're not just sitting around and taking money, doing nothing. People are still trying to look for jobs. They're trying to make sure that it ends meet. So I think COVID-19 will also help us look at universal basic income in a way, in a positive limelight, way where people are expecting other people to just be lazy and get me. There's an experiment that was done in Kenya a couple of years ago for only 10,000 people, where a group of people, mostly women, who are all very industrious. So we are hoping we'll see a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So addressing education and really focusing on youth, but also running, I would say, other types of social experiments. So thanks for that. Dr. Kumar, your concerns in your ideas on the humanity side, how can we address those in practice in this context that we are seeing? And maybe also reflecting on some of the things that we heard about youth engaging with a broader set of the economy. So what's your advice to take into account the things that you are thinking and working on?
Let me introduce another dimension to what I said. Let me say that access to digital infrastructure, considering the paramount importance of that access in a future world, will now be treated as a human right, as a basic human right. The right to education is not going to be a meaningful exercise without access to digital education. And if right to education, right to health, right to clean environment, right to security, right to privacy are already acknowledged as fundamental rights, all technologies that make those rights meaningful and available to the largest segments of our society will also begin to be treated as fundamental rights. Now, these will have huge implications for our social, economic, and political infrastructures. The other point that I would like to make is, for example, take the case of access to education. We talk about youth. Now we know on the basis of a very credible World Bank report that as far as girl education is concerned, the extension in the reach of that or scaling of that education has been directly attributable to digital technologies. In fact, every 1 year of school education completed by a girl child increases her capacity to earn by 18%. Now, the empowering aspect of technology is a given, but we also face the issue of an Orwellian state. We also have the threat of a Leviathan state looming all over us. And this is something that people intrinsically resent. Now, to marry the two imperatives, functional efficiencies, empowerment, etc., along with basic human values, will remain a challenge that is not easy to talk about within 2 minutes available to me now. But this is going to engage the global society for a very, very long time. And as we go along our path, we will have to harness technology in aid of health, in aid of education. For example, to give you two critical examples from my own country, because we talked about Digital India initiative, which has been quite a success. And I'm going to make one remark about what Mike Nelson talked about, political pessimism and technological optimism. I think that's going to be important, but I will say it in the last. Now, 76% of our health professionals are using digital health records. 46% of our health professionals are using artificial intelligence. Both these usages have immensely added to affordability and to the quality of the health services rendered. Likewise, the scale of the extension of the right to education to the people living in the rural areas, in the countryside, to the refugees, 80 million refugees all over the world, has been a phenomenal achievement, which would not have been possible without technology. The fact that we are conversing with people throughout the world on a very important subject is also a function of technology. But at the end of the day, we can't brush aside the very difficult questions. Now, coming to what Mike talked about, political leadership not being aligned to the need for giving a push to technology, I'm not quite sure whether that is universally true. For example, in my country, long before anybody talked about computers in my country, our late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi started the computerization and the IT empowerment in India. The Digital India the Digital India initiative has been carried forward by successive governments and with great success. We have been able to give 330 million poor people their food security through the public distribution system only on account of the unique identification number, the Aadhaar card, which is the largest exercise in the world in order to identify the people for targeted deliveries of subsidized food to poor people. Similarly, we've been able to plug leakages to the extent of $11.5 billion annually. So all these go to ensure that governance and services are improving. Now, right to information was something that our government introduced in this country, and that would not have been possible without the IT platforms, without digitalization of records. Millions of cars, I think we've got 250 million vehicles and 150 million driver's licenses that are all in the digital registries, which are available on the touch of hand. It was impossible till a few years ago. However, with all of this, the fear of the state overtaking the citizens who constitute the state in so many ways remains a real issue. We have known from history that all encroachments on people's liberties and rights, including privacy, etc., have always been done in the name of security of the state. Now, with the kind of a global atmosphere where security through different, looked at from different prisms is a real issue, it is very easy, even for democratic states, to continue to encroach upon people's freedoms. Now, whether we need that from technology, which is our creature, is a question that I always ask myself. Now, we will have to ensure that every technological infrastructure that we create must have a technology architecture that would prevent the encroachment of privacy and freedom. What you mentioned about encryption. Now, today, there's a very strong thrust by many governments to somehow dilute this encryption in the name of national security. Where that is going to lead us, what it will do to the way we live, the way we conduct our lives, our personal relations, our social relations, and the way it will impact our humanity is anybody's guess. But what I see happening is not what I like a lot.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. But also this, I think that the security and the individual, the citizen perspective on that and how important it is to address that, but also the layered system in which you need certain infrastructures to enable like social impact, as you mentioned. Deborah,
Roberto,
I would like to turn to you.
I wanted to jump in on that last conversation that was so important. And, you know, every country, of course, has different governance, but one thing that's very complicated in the United States, and I mentioned this on, I think, our first call, is that, you know, we obviously are a large country, but from the founding of our country, we have a very cultural and politically and legal separation between states and governors and the federal government. And states have a lot of power and autonomy. This has been back and forth over the years, you know, this whole theory of states' rights. And we've seen very uneven responses to, you know, dealing with the pandemic across the country because of states and the roles of governors and mayors. It's also playing out right now in issues around racial inequity and social justice. And it is something that, you know, is part of the American history and tradition. So we're not in, and I'm a tremendous optimist, but we're not going to see in the United States a one size fits all for everything because of this. But what we are going to see, I think, is progress on these overarching platforms. So, you know, having the highway system built that went across the whole country. We still don't have an integrated electric grid in the United States. States still control through their regulatory authorities all of our energy policies. And I think we will see some change on this, but not to the point that we have, you know, federal control, federal regulations on everything. It's really going to be a balance. And I do think that we run the risk of digital control and digital authoritarianism. We're seeing it in certain parts of the world. We're seeing the pilots for it with the Uyghurs. This is very, very scary. And, you know, we heard on one of our other calls from our colleague, Kandi Yamkela, the very big concerns in his country in Sierra Leone about tracking and monitoring for the virus, then being used, you know, for other purposes. So I think it's back to kind of the philosophy of the golden mean. We need a balance. We need to be very vigilant about this. And, you know, I'll just make this my final remark, so you don't need to call on me again, Roberto. But I think what we've heard today in this fabulous discussion about the digital world, I mean, it is the fusion of the physical and virtual world that we're living in. And it's going to affect, you know, our minds. It's going to affect our bodies. And we have to make sure that it doesn't hurt our souls, because the soul is still one area that I don't think is going to be subjected, you know, to the sense that we will lose that fundamental quality of being a human being. And that, again, is my final comment on the future of the digital world. I think the soul will be exempt, and I'm very happy about that, but that's my personal opinion. But thank you all for a fantastic discussion.
Mike, politicians think alike, right? Deborah and I think alike. Politicians think alike.
Maybe as we're approaching, let's say, the end of our session here, I really would like for us to go around for a final round here, starting with you, Mike. I think that you have different contributions. And when you make your final remarks, there are two questions that I wanted you to address here. One, it's about the global digital divide and how we can narrow that across nations, because let's say considering advanced and developing countries, how could we close that gap? And the other thing, it's more at the individual level. It's how can we manage our own capabilities to adapt to the speed of change, and I would say even the stress that comes out of that. So let's go for a final round, and I would like to invite you, Mike, to get us started.
Right. Well, as you know, I like to tweet a lot, and you can find me at Mike Nelson on Twitter. And so let me just do 3 tweets. The first is, the answer to every technology problem is innovation, competition, and transparency. We really have to know more about how these technologies are being used and abused, and that's government's most important role. We need more innovation so that satellite technology, laser technology, a lot of new technologies can reach the unconnected. The second point is that we need to have mutually assured disclosure. I will share a lot more information about what I'm doing and what my business does if the people I share it with, whether it's government or companies, tell me what they're doing with it. So rules that protect information aren't as important as rules that require disclosure about how that information is being used. I think the fact is technology is moving so fast. We're on camera 100 times a day. We have to just have more transparency. And the last point, real quick, if you really want to accelerate technology, focus on the hobbies and the fun. And that makes people a lot more comfortable about the future. While we saw this dramatic decrease in the amount of people watching sports, we saw this phenomenal increase in esports, 50 or 100%. People enjoy trying new things when it's not related to their job, when it's something for fun. So let's not forget the fun as we look at the digital transformation. And thanks again.
As Deborah says, related to things that touch our souls. Thanks for that. So maybe Alex, your take on your final comments and our reflections on what we discussed.
So thanks, Roberto. I've been just thinking about one of the questions that I've seen in the Q&A chat line regarding, with digitalization, the growing importance of data and data governance. May I say in my concluding remarks that at the heart of the fourth industrial revolution, also the heart of digitalization is data. Data is at the heart. But having that in mind, data governance becomes an even more important issue. I might kind of quote Madeleine Albright, say that citizens are speaking to their governments using 21st century technologies. Governments are listening on 20th century technology and providing 19th century solutions. Our governance solutions are out of step with today's powerful technologies. They're evolving, they're catching up, but they are out of step. And this is not the fault of government, in my view. It's a design flaw affecting every country around the world. And when you mention, what is connecting us and where do we have to have global kind of common interest? Well, perhaps it could be around data governance. But given the flaw that it exists, we should not be surprised that things are not going as well as we'd like. And we are increasingly being surprised by various breaches and various issues and security and trust issues that are part and parcel of digitalization. So going forward, I think, if I had to, provide one takeaway message, we need to all collectively, focus, on getting the data governance right, because that is one of the platforms for the future as well, especially within the global ecosystem.
It's all about data. Thanks for that, Alexander, and for reminding us that we need infrastructures to address that, right? Saif, what's your final comment?
Well, on the actually on the divide side, I think coverage of the connectivity is an important aspect. That's from one side. Basically, networks has to reach every place, the poor and the rich, and also the other part of that equation is affordability. The tools, the platforms which utilize this connectivity need to be made affordable to those who cannot really buy them. The governments need to intervene here. Maybe international fund sometimes need to be support that, because digital need, it's becoming like food. It's coming really like having the need for air and water. And I think it will be an important aspect, basically, to take care of the coverage and affordability dimension in the digital divide. For the digital transformation and the speed, I think this is also related to the availability of this digital training, digital platforms that will allow people really to educate themselves, do upskilling by themselves, and make these available to help this transition to take place in a smooth and in affordable way. So, open courses, for example, now available for free from the best universities, and lots of tools actually through the cybersecurity, through the system, YouTubes and all kinds of tools are available to educate people. And I think we need these initiatives in order to speed that transformation and make it affordable, provided that we have the coverage and the affordability in place in order to make that transformation happen.
Thank you, Saif. Regina, if I may turn to you and your final comments.
My final comments would be to the question you asked: how do we reduce the digital fatigue? I think by doing a couple of things, meditating, if that's something that you are interested in doing, going outside, staying in the sun, if you're able to do, make sure you're maintaining social distancing, eating healthy food, connecting with people that you love, your family, your loved one. During this period, I've made a way more with my friends and my family, more than I used to do before. And I think that helps a lot. And just staying grounded. The last thing around the digital divide, I think all the speakers have mentioned interesting things. I think the one thing that maybe I need to add a bit is around awareness. I think most people are not aware of how big an opportunity it is by having a digital twin in any industry. I think if you tell the young people, hey, if you go into cybersecurity, like this is the market cap in cybersecurity, or in biotechnology, in agri-tech, in energy, I think we're going to see way more people engaging in creating the tools and the digital tools, rather than leaving other people who are creating that for traffic regions where they don't understand. Everyone is engaged, communities are engaged, and they have an opportunity to share their thoughts and ideas.
Regina? I think everybody lost her.
Did you lose me? Roberto, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So advocacy. So we need to spread the news
You
about
lost me at that
opportunity.
point. Yes. I don't know why you lost me.
Yeah, but I think we got that. So we have an infrastructure issue here. So thanks for sharing that, Regina. Ildar, your final comments and ideas.
I have seen the question which was related to the government guidance of digitalization initiatives. What we have seen even within our own companies, I mean, bringing the initiatives on digitalization doesn't mean that the people will just take it easy. I mean, that is primarily fear of failure, fear of losses, and that is bringing that today we need to think how actually they structure these initiatives. From our point of view, that led us to create different tracks on innovation, what we call ABC within our companies. When we create the old way of doing business, we create the new, improved way of doing, and we're looking for the discovery part, and we call ABC. And it's a digitalization that is clearly bringing the uncertainty. We have to embrace this uncertainty. And it's not only about the culture, it's also about how it's actually structured, because in a way, the people were today working in the certain framework of the social frameworks. And from that point of view, we have to overcome all of that. And what I say, and today in digitalization, I would say experimentation. That is should be a driver of the process. And we have to just release this power of experimentation. And I wish that it will be available to all of us.
Yeah, and thanks for highlighting that. And I when I hear you, I think experimentation, not just in business, but in institutional frameworks, in government, in policy, right? So it's a kind of new mindset to others, a new world. So thanks for that. Dr. Kumar, your final ideas.
Well, my final ideas are in two sentences, beginning with my view that while we celebrate and acknowledge the transformative technological changes that will define the future world, let us work to ensuring that we bridge the digital divide, that we solve the problem of unequal access to internet and to unequal access to electricity that makes the access to digital infrastructure uneven. That will be absolutely necessary if we were to move towards a better world for all. But while we celebrate the technological advancements, let us not even for a moment forget the centrality of the heart, the centrality of the human emotion, the centrality of the human bonding, the centrality of what we are as a race, as individuals, as a people. Ultimately, at the end of the day, technologies do not constitute societies, people constitute societies. And technology has to be harnessed towards the achievement of the happiness of the largest number and largest freedom.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Deborah, your final ideas or final comment?
Just 3 words, transparency, truth, and trust. And
TTT.
moving to a new tremendous platform for inclusive innovation. And those 3 time-honored truths really permeate every society and every culture. And if we can use that as a baseline, I think we'll see a very, very exciting time in years to come. And thank you all so much. Thank you for being part of the GFCC and your contributions, and look forward to our next discussion. And I think you all know that we'll be gathering virtually for our annual meeting with our colleagues in Australia in November and continue these discussions. And you all have given us great ideas and intellectual content that we're going to build upon for the GFCC annual summit this year, which is going to be on bridging the chasm, health, innovation, and the future economy. And the health theme was actually chosen by our Australian partners over a year ago. So they were very prescient. And of course, Australia's done a superb job in both navigating, responding, and taking us to the future in the post-pandemic era. So thank you all very much. And I'll turn it back to you, Roberto.
For our group picture.
Yes.
So please have our cameras
Where's
on.
Regina? I think Regina left us though.
We had an infrastructure issue, it seems, right? But we'll find a way of including her. Don't worry. So, okay, so let's do this. Yeah, and here we go. Thank you so much for being with us. My takeaway from this whole conversation, it's really about social systems, how we intervene and how we could intervene to create a better world, but really to find the levers in business, in the economy, in society that could really augment the potential and the impact of digital technologies. As Deborah said, we will be here next week on the 8th for a conversation on innovation partnerships. Join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid.
Roberto, will the
Bye-bye.
chats and the questions be preserved?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Take care.